Let me tell you a story, one that almost all of us were probably read as children. I have a theory that there is an unwritten law that every church must have a Noah's Ark themed nursery. But because we see it as a children's story, I'm not sure that we often stop to really look past the whimsical illustrations to see the decidedly not whimsical words. You would think that if I gave a sermon the title of Rainbow, that it would be whimsical. Yeah, you would think that, wouldn't you? It really isn't that kind of story. So you see, once upon a time, when the earth was still new, humans had already figured out how to be terrible to each other. And what is worse, we'd figured out how to do it on a large scale. God had created a beautiful world for us, and we looked around and saw nature not as a source of life, but as a source of raw materials to make weapons. And God was hurt, and God was disappointed, and there was grief in God's heart, an ache that made the whole universe tremble, like it was trying to hold back tears. Maybe God wasn't exactly surprised, but God was certainly not happy about how quickly our wonder at creation had turned to violence towards each other. God called out to us, but we didn't listen for God's voice above our own shouting. So God was angry, as God had absolutely every right to be, because we were supposed to be taking care of the earth and taking care of all of God's children, but instead we were taking care of ourselves and creating hierarchies of us and them, and they don't matter. God wanted to fix it. God wanted to reach out and end our wars and turn our faces towards love and kindness and pull our bows and arrows and knives right out of our hands. But God had given us free will, which is often a curse as much as it is a blessing, because there are consequences to the choices that we make, and those consequences don't affect just us. So far, it's no stretch of the imagination to follow this story. It's the story of humanity, the story we see every day. But it's at this point that the narrative takes a more dramatic turn from history to myth. Some experiences are hard to put into words, so they become more like stories or fables or metaphors or character studies than a literal retelling of facts. Sometimes we like to imagine how a historical figure would respond to the present day, or how someone else might solve a problem, or what we would do if all the decisions were up to us. You could erase your mistakes. You could decide what all the rules were. People who would hurt you would get what was coming to them, and they wouldn't be able to hurt anyone else ever again. There are a lot of stories in the Bible like that, because we've been trying since creation to understand God. God doesn't always make the same choices that we think we might. But what would happen if God decided to be as vindictive as we humans sometimes are? Once upon a time, God looked out at all the hurt and sorrow that God's own beloved people were choosing to create. God thought about starting over, flooding the earth and washing it clean, and returning creation to its original state of welter and waste and darkness. Maybe, if God started over, maybe this time humanity would be better. So God tore the sky apart and let the floodgates open until the whole earth was underwater. This is the point where the narrative shifts. It is no longer about the loving God we recognize and worship, but about a God of the storyteller's imagination. It didn't happen, not like that, not really. But God would have been justified if God had indeed chosen to start over. It didn't happen, but even if it had, the cycle of sin and violence just would have started over right again. The important part of the story isn't the colorfully illustrated pairs of animals marching 2 by 2. The point isn't the fantasy of identifying with the one family worth saving. The point isn't even God's wrath, even though we deserved it and still often do. The point is the covenant that comes at the end of the story, as God meets us and sets a sign in the sky to remind us all to pause and take a breath and be awed by the beauty of the rainbow, and be amazed at the love and power of our God who hung it there in the sky. So as we read the story together, which we are now about to do, I want you to keep two things in mind. There was never a flood that drowned the whole world, but I think we can certainly understand how a more local flood could feel that way. There was never a flood that drowned the whole world, and we have never had a God who would destroy the creation God had so lovingly made just because God was disappointed in us. But I think that we have all felt anger and disappointment and frustration and heartbreak that were so intense we wanted to give up on everything. Quit a job, move out of the country, drop every person in your community, disown your family, leave your partner, walk away, even fall asleep and never wake up. We know that God loves us, but we also know that we don't always love each other, and that is very lonely. And looking out upon so many generations of people who hurt each other so casually and so often, surely God sometimes feels a cosmic disappointment in us all. Has God ever thought about giving up on us? The answer is no. We know that the answer is no, but throughout the generations we have wondered, what if? After all, it's what any of us might do if we were in God's shoes. Our second reading this morning comes to us as excerpts from the book of Genesis, chapters 6 through 9. Hear now the word of the Lord. The Lord saw that the wickedness of humankind was great in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry for having made humankind on the earth, and there was grief in God's heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out from the earth the human beings I have created, for I am sorry that I made them. But Noah found favor in the sight of God. The earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw that the earth was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted its ways upon the earth. So God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. Now I am going to destroy them along with the earth. Make yourself an ark of cypress wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and out with pitch. For my part, I am going to bring a flood of waters on the earth to destroy from under heaven all flesh in which is the breath of life. Everything that is on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you. And you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And of every living thing of all flesh you shall bring 2 of every kind into the ark, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. 2 of every kind shall come in with you, to keep them alive. Also take with you every kind of food that is eaten and store it up, and it shall serve as food for you and for them. Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. On that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened up. The rain fell on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. The flood continued for 40 days on the earth, and the waters increased and bore up the ark, and it rose high above the earth. The waters swelled and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the face of the waters. The waters swelled so mightily on the earth that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. The waters swelled above the mountains, covering them 15 cubits deep. And all flesh died that moved on the earth. Birds, domestic animals, wild animals, all swarming creatures that swarm on the earth, and all human beings, everything on dry land in whose nostrils was the breath of life, died. God blotted out every living human being. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those that were in the ark with him. And the waters swelled on the earth for 150 days. But then God made a wind blow over the earth, and the waters subsided. The fountains of the deep and the windows of the heavens were closed. The rain from the heavens was restrained, and the waters gradually receded from the earth. At the end of 150 days, the waters had abated, and the tops of the mountains reappeared. Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made and sent out the dove from him to see if the waters had subsided from the face of the ground. But the dove found no place to set its foot, and it returned to him in the ark, for the waters were still on the face of the earth. So he put out his hand and took it and brought it back into the ark with him. He waited another 7 days, and again he sent out the dove from the ark, and the dove came back to him in the evening. And there in its beak was a freshly plucked olive leaf. So Noah knew that the waters had subsided from the earth. Then he waited another 7 days and sent out the dove, and it did not return to him anymore. God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth." Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, "As for me, I am establishing my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, as many as came out of the ark. I establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of a flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the whole earth." God said, "This is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations. I have set my bow in the clouds, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth, and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth." God said to Noah, "This is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. The story of Noah's ark, of God's flood and rainbow, it's really, really dark. God murders everyone, then sits back and watches as the whole earth spends 5 months submerged underwater so deep that even the tips of the highest mountains are 25 feet underwater. 5 months. 5 months of nothing but water. Then the waters start to go down very slowly. It takes 40 days just to be able to see the tops of the mountains that had been 25 feet underwater. That's when Noah sends out birds on recon missions. It's another 3 months after that when he and his family can finally get off the boat. Noah then becomes the first person to plant a vineyard. He made wine and drank it until he was so drunk he became unconscious. I often somewhat sarcastically summarize Bible stories. Not in this case. Noah was the first person to plant a vineyard and to get drunk until he passed out. Even if the flood waters had washed away all the ghost towns and everyone who had drowned, I don't think anyone would fault Noah for getting that drunk, other than his sons. Because even after wiping out everything and starting all over, there is still despair and cruelty in the verses just after God's whole rainbow covenant speech. Humans are going to human. The first people to tell this story wondered what might happen if God were to unmake everything that God had made. It wouldn't be pretty. They wondered what might happen if humanity could get a fresh start. No oppressive governments, no debt, no inherited conflicts, no capitalism, no social classes, none of that. But even the first people to tell this story knew what would happen if humanity got a fresh start. We would go right back to hurting each other. It's what we do. It's easy to fear that nothing could ever change that cycle. It can often feel easy to fall into a void of hopelessness because there is so little in this world that we have control over. But the rainbow is declaring something to the universe in great big letters across the sky. God is love. God is mercy. God is second chances. God is big enough to love us no matter who we are or what we do or how close we come to breaking God's heart. We'll never be perfect, but we keep going. We keep trying. The story of God's flood and rainbow is nothing short of horrifying, but it is just a story. It was always just a story, a horrifying what if. What if God treated us the way we treat each other? But the God of this story isn't the God we worship. Our God created us in love and treasures us despite our flaws and offers us grace and promise, not as an apology for destroying the world, but just because God loves us. The rainbow isn't a monument to flood victims, a promise that God won't hurt us again. The rainbow is a visible reminder of God's grace, the promise that God will never stop loving us, even when we hurt each other. Sometimes we hurt each other. We hurt God, too. But God loves us too much to ever destroy us, because God is not vindictive. Sometimes we want to give up, but God loves us too much to ever give up on us. Sometimes we live in the darkness, consumed with the wrong things, feel like the storm will never end, think we can't go on. But God put a rainbow in the sky. For all the selfishness and pain in this world, there is love and beauty too. We have all felt anger and disappointment and frustration and heartbreak. But in those moments, when we are tempted to give up on everything, I think God leans down towards us and whispers softly, "Beloved, look up." You'll find a rainbow, some sign of love or beauty or joy or kindness or promise or hope or community. Be still and know that the Lord our God is with us. When you have half a mind to burn it all down, set your bow and arrow, set your weapons and your dreams of revenge down. Listen for the voice of God. Look for the beauty. Focus on the things that matter, really matter. There is a love that arches above everything, a love that is always within reach. We may be prone to wander, prone to leave the God we love, prone to hurt each other, prone to feel like we are drowning in a world that so often chooses hate over love. Lord knows this planet feels like a hopeless place. But we have come this far with God's help, and God won't let us drown.